Greetings, tiny clay humans. Welcome to Truth in the Movies. Today we'll be going over 3,000 Years of Longing, an interesting movie about me and my kind, and you and your kind. Let us not waste any more time, and let's jump into this movie and figure out some of the esoteric symbolism and hidden stories contained within. 3,000 Years of Longing. If you're watching me live, I'd like to say Merry Christmas Eve to everyone. So I hope you're having happy holidays. 3,000 Years of Longing, a movie about genies, wishes, electromagnetics, vapor, and all kinds of other interesting things. Let's check it out and jump into the movie. We start off by meeting the main character. And she says, "My name is Alethea." That's an interesting name to have. Let's jump in and see what Alethea represents. She's going to be the main character throughout this movie. Alethea is an ancient Greek word that means truth. So the main character represents truth all throughout the movie. She's a truth seeker. She's someone that's looking for the truth actively. She says, "My name is Alethea," which means truth. My story is true. So this is going to be about true stories that have been made into fiction in the modern world. You're more likely to believe me, however, if I tell it as a fairy tale. Quite often the truth is said in jest. And some of the best truths are revealed to people through mediums like movies and television and stuff like that. So she's going to tell this as if it were a fairy tale. So for those of you who have ears to hear, you'll pick up something. For those of you who would just simply like to be entertained, I hope you will be. So once upon a time, and then they show you an airplane flying over the sky. Let's take a look at the name on the airplane. This is the airlines. This is a fictional airlines, and it's called Shahrazad Airlines. So let's see what Shahrazad is. It's very interesting because Shahrazad shares the airlines, shares the same exact name as the narrator from 1001 Nights. It says it's composed of the word Sher, which means lineage, and Azad, which means noble. So a noble lineage, aka fairy tales. These are tales from the fairies. And this is also the name of the woman who tells the stories in 1001 Nights, the storyteller in the narrative of the Middle Eastern collection of tales known as 1001 Nights. Now, she's on an airplane in Shahrazad, and she's doing some research. And she says, "I'm living off of the exercise of my scholarly mind." So she's constantly a researcher looking into things. She's also a storyteller. She researches comparative mythology. She takes the old legends and the myths and she finds the truths contained within them. Her business was story. She likes to tell stories. She's a storyteller. She was a narratologist who sought to find the truths common to all of the stories of humankind, which is what we do here on my channel too, so I can relate. Now, she gets into the airport and she's met by some strange looking man who grabs a hold of her little shopping cart, and he looks kind of weird, and all of a sudden it says down there, static buzzing. So there's some sort of an electrical component, and this guy right here, whoever he is, he's got electricity buzzing all around him, and then she starts to go blurry in her sight, and then his eyes light up from the inside. They start turning sort of a white color. And as you can see, if you look at his head, he has a conical shaped head. He's got a cone head, basically, which is interesting because that's what the legends say. Our space brothers or sky brothers, or those who fell down or came down from the sky, ancestors, that they had heads that were similar, that they had conical shaped heads. And therefore they wore conical hats that were much longer in the back. And then those who were the priests of those beings, those who were their speakers and representatives to the rest of humanity and the tiny clay humans, they would also dress similarly. They wanted to be like them. Although they themselves might not have had conical heads, they wore the same type of dress, which is why we have conical hats, wizard hats, sorceress hats that are very long and pointy, etc. And then she's telling her friends, "When I met this guy, he was hot to the touch. and musky. He smelled. There was a smell that came from him. That's because of the world where these people come from. And that smell is also associated typically with the underworld itself. And he says, perhaps it was a jinn. So she's being serious, trying to tell people about this weird dude that she met in the airport with the conical shaped head and electricity buzzing all around him. And whenever she tells everyone, he just says, maybe it was a jinn. And then they all laugh. Well, let's take a look at the word jinn. It's directly related to the word genie. That's where we get the word genie from. And it says here, jinn is an Arabic collective noun deriving from the Semitic root word J-in-in or jannan. Whose primary meaning is to hide or to adapt. So they're saying that the word jinn or jannan or genie means to hide or to adapt, something that can change its shape so as not to be seen. They're shapeshifters, essentially. Some authors interpret the word to mean literally beings that are concealed from the senses. Now, does it mean that they are humanoid and in the flesh like we are? Possibly. Could mean something else, though. Cognates include the Aramaic majnun, which means possessed or generally insane. So the word that means possessed, the word that means that you have been taken over by another entity, is related to the word genie or jinnan. It's also related to Jannah, which means garden, Eden, or heaven, and Janin, which means embryo. Jinn is properly treated as a plural. However, in classic Arabic, it also may refer to as Jan, with the singular being Jani. The origin of the word jinn remains uncertain, but I will tell you, I've mentioned this many times, the origin and the root of Jan is J-in, aka also gan, G-in. If we take a look at the etymology of the word genie, it says right here, it's related to the word in Latin, genius, right? So when people say you're a genius, meaning you're much smarter than other people, or you seem to have skills high and far above those compared to other humans. And it's a translation of Arabian Nights to render the Arabic genie, the singular of jinn. Also, it says they are called upon, the genies are called upon for protection or magical aid after, often under the leadership of a king. So oftentimes these jinn or these genie were called upon to help out mankind or specific people in humanity, usually a king. Many people who believe in jinn wear amulets to protect themselves against the assaults or possible assaults of the jinn. So there are these amulets that you can get. Certain spells, I guess you could call them, that are designed to protect the wearer from the magic power of the genie. Although generally invisible, jinn are supposed to be composed of thin and subtle bodies. They can change at will. They would favor the form of snakes, but also appear as scorpions, lizards, and humans. Well, that's interesting. I wonder why they would have assumed the form of snakes so often. We've talked about the snake symbolism and the serpent symbolism quite often on my channel and its relationship to plasma, right? But they are composed of thin and subtle bodies. Since jinn are neither innately evil nor innately good, Islam acknowledged spirits from other religions and was able to adapt spirits from other religions during its expansion. Jinns are not a strictly Islamic concept. They may represent several pagan beliefs integrated into Islam. So the genies are not inherently good or evil. As a matter of fact, in Islam, they were seen as being much like you and I, with free will. Now, here is the origin, I believe, of the word jinn or gan, which comes from gimel nun, which together translates in ancient Phoenician and Hebrew as garden, basically. So ganon or jinn or janan means one of the garden or somebody from the garden. Ganon is also a popular character in The Legend of Zelda. He's actually the main bad guy that Link always fights in order to save Princess Zelda. His name is also Ganon, and he's quite often represented as a shapeshifter and seen as being associated with plasma, as you can see. So this guy says, are you saying you, or she's saying back to him, are you saying that you believe in jinn? And he says, I believe that there are those who need to believe in them. He doesn't believe in genies, but he thinks that other people do, and that's fine. Jinn, ghosts, aliens, whatever helps. And then they all have a good laugh at her expense. Although she's telling the truth, they immediately dismiss it as a joke, as something that is from the ancient world, and therefore it's not real in the modern world any longer. So they take her up to her room. She's going to some sort of a convention because she is going to be a speaker. She's a guest speaker at this convention, and she's going to share her comparative mythology. So she goes up to her room, and this guy says, wow, it's the Agatha Christie room. How amazing. You got the Agatha Christie room. She wrote Murder on the Orient Express. But take a look at what door they purposefully chose to put her in. The room number is 333. 3 threes in a row, a powerful number when combined together. I believe personally that the word 3, or the number 3, and the word for it, derive from the word tree, the ancient word deru, right? Tree, trio, etc. Also, of note, the world's most haunted hotels lists the Langham Hotel, and specifically room number 333. Here's allegedly a picture of the exact hotel. It kind of reminds me of The Shining, actually. This takes you to room 333. Now let's check this out real quick. This is interesting. When the BBC took over, a newscaster woke up in his room in room 333. He saw a ball of light that slowly turned into almost complete human form, minus the calves and the feet. The reporter asked the entity what it wanted, but instead of replying, it just reached out its arms and slowly moved toward the reporter. Much like if you have a plasma ball and you touch the glass of the plasma ball, that plasma reaches out to you. It would like to connect. So he ran to the other room to get a coworker and begged him to come and see. He complied, and when they got back to the room, the ghost was still there, slowly fading, but still there. So now we find Aletheia, or the Truth. She's at this conference, and she's about to give her presentation. Now, the guy who is introducing her says, so how would you explain? He's talking to the audience. This is the rest of the world, by the way, when they show you something like this. So they're speaking to the rest of the world. This audience represents the general population. So he says, how would you explain the power of a thunderstorm? How can you explain the seasons if you don't know that the earth orbits the sun while tilted on an axis? Well, let me jump right in and share with him how I could personally know that. So he's asking, how could you know that how the seasons work if you didn't understand the modern concept of space? I'll tell you, it's very easy. There is an ancient concept of quote unquote our local geography, cosmology, and what is known as space. This right here is the point of focus known as the sun. And it goes around. It goes around in a circle above this plane of existence, and then it shoots way out to the edge during the winter solstice, and then it moves closer to the inside tropics during the summer solstice. And that is how that could happen. I even did draw a picture for the guy. This is just for this guy over here who doesn't know how that would be possible. I'd like to just teach him real quick. So let's just say this is a crude conceptual model, but let's say you have a dome type world, and then you have plasma that is spiraling down on top of that glass type of or ice type of a dome. The light from that plasma passes through if it's transparent, and if it does, it meets and it creates a focal point, giving us quote unquote daylight. Now this is what it would look like whenever it is the winter time and the plasma tube above our world is much thicker because it's pulsating, it's much wider. But whenever it contracts and it goes inwards, that means that the focal point also goes inwards and it goes towards the northern tropics, giving us summertime. So I hope that helps to clear that up just for the guy in the movie so he can better understand how people like me could know these things without modern knowledge being forced upon me. So he said everything was a mystery, right? He's talking about in the ancient times and this is kind of how we're taught. So be careful if you're in academics or if you're caught up in the school system or whatnot. They will often infer. They will basically tell you that your ancient ancestors were retarded, that your ancestors were stupid, that they couldn't figure out seasons, that they couldn't figure out things well, he's going to give us a list of things here, but here you can see, here are some ancient concepts of what I just drew and how these people all believed in an alternative cosmology that at times helps to explain the world that we live in. As you can see, sometimes they even draw a snake around the world, representing the serpent symbolism of plasma. Plasma wrapped around our world, providing sunlight and therefore the seasons, etc. He says, it was a mystery. The seasons, tsunamis, microbial diseases. They couldn't possibly have known about these things in the ancient past. And then he continues, what else could we do but resort to stories? Now there's where I would agree with him. Not everyone understands these concepts, and not everyone today even understands these concepts. You see, speakers like that tend to project things onto the modern world. Just because we collectively have we have access to technology does not mean that we collectively know how that technology works, know how to replicate that technology at all. For the most part, it's a small group of people that look into these technologies, build them, and work upon them. Then they just distribute them to everyone else who just blindly uses them without knowing what they are or how they work. Now imagine the modern world goes through its own apocalyptic cycle, and the survivors wake up. And they find things like ancient technology. Do you think they're going to know what those things are? Are they going to know how to piece them back together and recreate them? Probably not, right? Which means that that would be the new ancient ancestors who didn't know what these things were, so they created stories. They described it in the best way that they could, just like you would describe it in the best way you could if suddenly you were thrust into the Stone Age all of a sudden, and you came across ancient technology and people are asking you, what is that? How does it work? What does it do? Right? You would probably start telling some stories to try to get them, to build a bridge so that they could understand. And she says, by telling each other stories. And in the audience, this guy shows up. Very bright being. He's very shiny and stands out amongst the crowd, right? And you can see it says that there is static buzzing around this guy. She sees him, no one else does. And they say ever present in all cultures, all mythologies, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Norse. And then what they're showing you is a family tree of all of these various gods and how, using comparative mythology, we can see that one side is completely related to the other. They all share the exact same similarities when we come across these stories. We can see that they are about something. There's something of substance. There is truth to these ancient myths and legends about the gods of old. There's truth behind all of the stories of each religion itself. If we combine them, we can start to find how those truths are related to one another. All right, cool. So then she looks out into the crowd, and the genie, he's basically a genie, he has moved seats. He's now closer to her. So he's creeping up, and he's starting to buzz a little bit more, right? The guy behind her says, these are their vestiges, and he's pointing to the comic book characters, right? So they got all these comic book characters, and they're saying, these represent the gods of old. You are being retold the same stories over and over and over. It's just that they've been cartoonified. The question remains, what is their purpose? What is the purpose of Thor and the Marvel Universe and DC and all of these comic books that continue to remind us of ancient truths? Now this guy stands up. He's like, okay, all right, I'm listening. He starts to buzz even more. He's kind of getting upset by the presentation that he's listening to. So Alethea stands up and she says, there is mythos and there is science. So now she's going to equate science to the myths. This guy is not liking it. He's starting to buzz even more. He's like, okay, well, what are you about to say? What are you about to say? Mythology is what we knew back then. Science is what we know so far. This guy's not having it. He's not enjoying the presentation. He starts buzzing even more, you can tell. Sooner or later, our creation stories are replaced by the narratives of science. This guy is pissed. He does not enjoy hearing this whatsoever. He represents the old ways. He represents the stories and the myths and the legends and the truth that exists behind them. These things are real. It's just that we've played a 1,000-year-old or a 3,000-year-old game of telephone, retelling these stories over and over. And in that, the substance has dissipated. The substance has been lost, and people attribute these stories to lies, that they are not true, that they are untrue, and they're only good for distracting you from what is important so that you can take a break from the loops that you're caught in. She says all gods and monsters outlive their original purpose, and they are reduced to a metaphor. Rubbish, he says. Ah! And he jumps in Ghostbusters style and looks to be swallowing the woman up whole. She passes out. She totally falls down. And he's like, she just fell. She just fell. And I remember her name means the truth. She represents the truth. This is the truth falling. This is the fall of the truth. Whenever they replace the ancient stories with modern academics or quote unquote science, as she says, the truth falls. The truth falls down. The truth fails. Or the truth doesn't fail. The truth falls. She falls. Those people who would call themselves the truth tellers. Now, they're walking away and he says, her friend says, you're behaving like a child. Do you know that? She says, you know, I actually am a child. And then they both have a hearty little laugh. Oh, it's funny. You actually are a child. But that's not funny. I don't get it. I don't see how that's funny. I didn't laugh at that particular part of the movie because she is a child. So is that guy. So is every single character in this movie that you see. So is every person. Baby, old man, old woman, middle-aged, it doesn't matter. We used to live, according to the myths and the legends, for hundreds of years, if not thousands. So, in comparison to our own history, we are children. And that day will return when we get that lifespan back. So they have a good laugh, they take off, and she goes to the local bazaar to just buy some gifts while she's out of the United States and says, if there is fate, can we accept it? Can you accept it if there is something known as fate? Is that something that you could accept? If you were in a movie, could you change the movie while in the movie? Interesting thoughts. Now, she goes to the pile of junk and she's sifting through it. From the bottom of that pile, I chose a memento. So she pulls out this piece from the Middle East and it's supposed to be some sort of an old lamp type of a deal. This guy says it's called the Nightingale's Eye. Well, let's check that out. I've seen the word nightingale come up a time or two. Let's figure out what nightingale means. If we look it up, it says it's from Nacht, which means night. Galon, Nachtgalon, which means to sing. So the night song. And to sing, the root of that comes from the word gel, the Proto-Indo-European root word gel, which means to call. So it could mean night singer or night call. However, gel also has another meaning in Proto-Indo-European, and it means to shine. So it could mean the night shine or the night light. Now, what kind of lights are there that shine at night and they don't disrupt the nighttime? They don't make it daytime or anything like that. Things like bioluminescence, fluorescence, neon lights, etc., aka often plasma. Plasma is the dark light. Plasma is the light that you can use at night, and it doesn't change the fact that it is night. It just lights up a bit. There's another one. I like that one too. All right, so plasma is the dark light. Nightingale essentially means the dark light or the night light, or it could be. Which also reminded me of the sound of silence, right? So there's a song called The Sound of Silence, and these particular lyrics I'll have you focus on. It says, I turned my collar to the cold and damp when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night. So the flash of a neon light. He turned his collar to the cold and damp because the world depressurizes. All of the lights go out, so it's going to be dark, and his eyes were stabbed by a flash of a neon light. The neon light is the inner earth energy that shoots up out of the middle of our world, along with the magenta-colored plasma that spirals down from the heavens after the electromagnetic barrier has been removed during the neutral point of the polarity shift. So she's got her little lamp, and she says, oh, her buddy's like, it's been damaged by fire. Pick something else. Now, this object that the genie is contained within represents our world. It's a microcosmic symbolism of our entire world on a small scale. And that's why he says, it's been damaged by fire. Pick something else. We've been through this before. We've been flooded, and then it's been followed up by a cataclysm of fire each and every time. She says, I like it. I'm going to go with this. She doesn't want anything nicer. She goes home, cleans it off, accidentally breaks it, opens up, and this plasma-looking kind of smoke starts to swirl around in her sink, giving us the symbolism of the all-seeing eye with the ring and then the dot or the secondary ring on the inside of it. Now, if we go to Islam and we take a look at the jinns, it says here that the jinn were created from smokeless flame of fire. The messenger of Allah said, angels were created from light. Angels were created from a smokeless flame of fire. So this is what this is the tradition in Islam about genies, that they are created out of what is known as smokeless flame or smokeless fire. Plasma is a possible candidate, we would say, because it doesn't produce any smoke or anything, and yet it has various attributes much like fire. All right, so after that, the genie, boom, he explodes into her house. He's much too big to fit, so you can just see his golden foot sticking through the door there. She comes into the next room and asks him, I don't suppose you speak English. Elinika? Elinika is how you say Greek in ancient Greek, basically. And he says, you speak the Greek of Homer. And he's speaking in Greek, which I think is really weird that they chose him to speak Greek. So he says, do not fear me, nor treat me casually, right? Same thing as fire or plasma or whatever, electricity. Don't fear. There's no need to fear fire or be afraid of it until I mean, people will naturally be afraid of it. Children, if you give them a match and they've never used one before, they'll be freaked out and scared to use it. But once you understand its properties, once you understand how it works, there's no need to be afraid of it. But don't treat it casually. It's a powerful substance. I must grant you 3 wishes. 3 is 3, a number of power. You may not wish for endless wishes. Now, let me tell you something. That's something that everyone always thinks of. If I had 3 wishes, I would just wish for 1,000,000 more. I would wish for infinite wishes. You do not want infinite wishes because that means you will live eternally, infinite, forever, and there will never come an end to whatever this reality is. You will never escape it because you have chosen to continue forever, on and on and on and on, without end, until you finally use one of your infinite wishes to wish that you didn't have infinite wishes, so that you can stop playing this game, etc. So one of the rules is you may not have infinite wishes. Another thing to go along with that is because you also may not have eternal life. So you would need eternal life in order to have eternal wishes. So you may not have eternal wishes because you may not have eternal life. It is your nature to be mortal. Or to die, to transition, right? Mine is to be immortal. So ours is to be mortal. Theirs is to be immortal. Also, it's something that's interesting too is, well, I'll come back to that. So he touches her keyboard and you can see it says static buzzing on the keyboard. So here's some more electricity things that are making a connection to electricity or electromagnetics and the jinn themselves. Static is buzzing. He reaches over and touches her television and turns it on. You can see that they put purposefully onto the TV as a part of the script, Einstein. There's some sort of a video of Einstein teaching, and he says, "What is this small human?" Now, you might think that he says small because he's a genie and he doesn't understand modern technology, so he sees a little tiny human on the video, so that Einstein is a small human in comparison to the woman who's in the room with him. I don't believe that's why he calls Einstein a small human. We are all small. We are all small, tiny humans in the day and age that we live in now, called the modern age. We used to be, according to the legends and traditions, much bigger, gigantic in comparison to what we look like today. So, compared to the genie, who is normal, see, that's why he's so big, okay? He's been in that bottle for a very long time, and when he was last out of it, that's probably the size that he was, because that's probably the size that everyone else was. So he chose that form and that size in order to fit in, because that's how large people were, or at least that's how large the beings were that he was around. So that's why he pops out of that, assuming a gigantic shape. But now he's in a world where the pressure has been building and building, shrinking everything inside of it for hundreds of years, if not thousands. So he calls all of the humans small. So she's like, he's a wizard. I don't know how to explain that. He says, are you a witch who has him in a box? So now he's having a little dialogue with her about trapping Einstein in the box. Another thing is that he is trapped in the box symbolically. The box reference always is our world. The box is the container, and our world is a container. So Pandora's box and any type of box that is opened where there's a surprise or a temptation or something, especially if the box is opened and there's some sort of curses or some sort of gifts or something that come out of it, that represents our world during the apocalypse. When our world opens up, the box opens up. She says, I have something to tell you, something I've never told anybody. At that time, I found myself in a school for girls, and she makes a point that this was a school for only girls, gaggles of girls, as she refers to them as. Now, this is a reference, I believe, to the anode and cathode islands at the North Pole, where on one island are born mostly females, because it's mostly a female energy on that side. On the other side, inversely, would be the male island, where the males are born. So she starts telling him how she basically had an imaginary friend. And this imaginary friend would comfort her, and he was born out of a need to imagine. That means that her ability to imagine things and stuff was basically shunned, right? That people shunned her because she was different. She was an outcast. Remember, she's a truth seeker. So the truth seekers are different typically, and outcasts typically. So she comes up with things in her imagination that provide her lots of comfort. So she's breathing. You can see her imaginary friend waiting off on the side, and it says she's breathing laboriously like she has asthma. This is a reference to the apocalypse, whenever everyone will be breathing laboriously. Everyone will be struggling to breathe when the air itself is being sucked out of our atmosphere and off beyond the skyline. Her imaginary friend provides her comfort, and she says, I feared that he would leave, so I wrote him down. Now, this is in reference to two different worlds. The world that she lives in is the modern world, right? With all of the various spectrum of light, the various spectrum of colors that we have from a different source of light that we have today in this age, in comparison to the black and white world of so long ago, where it was monochromatic, where people got used to only one color, which represented light and dark. That's why her imaginary character, she's thinking of those times a long time ago, times forgotten to us that we call, or that I call, our ancient oblivion. So she's holding on to those memories. She's holding on to the way that things once were. And so she writes these things down. She collects all of her notes about this imaginary friend, which is symbolically our ancient past. She even put the all-seeing eye in this book, as you can see here, right? She draws the eye of her imaginary friend there. So she's taking notes on the ancient world, on the way that it used to be. In the movie, she's developing an imaginary friend, essentially. But the more realism I tried to insert into her stories, the more I began to doubt. I felt silly. Now, I would caution many of you, because the further down you go into the rabbit hole, the more silly things start to look whenever you revert back to your older ways of thinking, your academically minded ways of thought, right? They start to look silly in comparison. But the reality is, it is this world that is silly in comparison. So I burned it all in the school furnace. So all of that ancient knowledge, symbolically speaking, has been burned, has been lost. The ancient libraries, the great libraries of old, all of our ancient proof of the way things once were has all been burned, lost, forgotten, and drowned under the waters of a deluge. And after that, he disappeared altogether. Now, if her imaginary friend represents the ancient world that seems so fantastic to us today, we have forgotten about it. All of the information has been lost. It's been obliterated. And the genie says, and yet I am here. And yet I am here. So although modern academics would say that these things are false, that they don't exist, that they are stories and nothing more than stories, when they reappear, they will be evident. And some people won't be able to justify or reconciliate the two. They won't be able to reconcile the two. So they'll have all the things they were taught their entire lives, and they'll have to compare that to what is physically actually happening and what their senses are telling them from their actual experience as they're experiencing it. It might drive some people crazy. A more convenient size, I see, she says. So he shrinks back down to a more convenient size, still pretty gigantic. You've been trapped in a bottle 3 times, she says. So this is him reincarnation. This is his reincarnation cycle, essentially, coming back into the earth time and time and time again. She says, who was she? I know why you got trapped in the bottle. Who was she? She was Sheba. The Queen of Sheba? Her mother was a jinn. Is that possible? I might have become more, but for Solomon. So he was in love with this fabled, mythic Queen of Sheba, which we don't have a lot of information on. The Queen of Sheba might as well be a myth herself. However, she is a matter of fact. She's mentioned as a matter of fact in the Bible. As a matter of fact, as a matter of actually existing. And she, it is said, went to King Solomon. She heard about the wisdom of this king, of this man who basically became the king of the known world at the time, and people loved him, and people revered him. So Sheba went to go visit Solomon and paid him homage. So this is the Sheba that he was in love with. He came from across the deserts to woo her. No, didn't she go to him, actually? That's what it says in all of the holy books. His response is, Madam, I was there. Madam, I was there. Okay, I don't want to hear about your holy books. I was there. All right. And Solomon came to Sheba. So we flash back. We go back to Sheba's temple. I'm assuming this is what this is. She's surrounded by her jinn friends, her genie friends. Solomon sits alone as a one-man band in front of everybody, rocking out to a crowd of these various jinn. Let's take a look at some of these guys. Now, one of these guys you've seen before at the airport at the beginning. Recognize that guy with the electricity crackling all the way around him? And then we've got the Jar Jar Binks looking jinn. We've got Baraka from whatever that is. We've got some Egyptian looking jinn. We've got a Fantazoid looking jinn. There's all kinds of interesting jinn. We've got those things from Star Wars. What are those called? Those little desert creepies. Those little desert dudes that scavenge for everything. Looks like Samus. I don't know who this is. There's all kinds of genies here, basically. And they're all listening to Solomon play his music. And they sit at the top of what could be construed as an unfinished pyramid. They're steps, basically. Now, Solomon's wearing his fabled ring. I'm not sure which one it is, but you can see that there's this eye symbolism right here with 3 strings running through it. We've talked about the 3 beams at the North Pole, the anode, cathode, and Mount Meru. Here's Solomon's ring. Now, for those of you who don't know the story, in the Bible, there was King David, right? And I think his son, I believe, was Solomon, and he was one of the wisest people ever to live. Solomon had a ring, the stories say, and this ring was a ring of power. He could command spirits, genies, demons, whatever you'd like to call them, and have them do work for him. He actually commissioned the genies or the spirits to help him to build the temple of Solomon. And he was able to use the special sigil in order to manipulate these beings. So there are these sigils, there are these designs that you can use in order to manipulate the energy of the genies. Right? Exactly like how your microchip, right? If you think of a sigil as a microchip, the microchip is designed in a specific pattern in order to manipulate the path of the electricity that runs through it, right? In order to use that electricity to your benefit to get things done, just like Solomon did. So Solomon's rocking out on his little one-man band guitar type deal. A little piece of it off to the side starts playing itself, actually. Take a look at that. It's got little wooden arms that sprouted off to the side. He's rocking out. It's a pretty good song. Groot is pretty much on this thing, rocking out with King Solomon. So Groot's on top whistling. Groot's arms are down there playing. He's got these drum things off on either side, so he's drumming and stuff. Very much a one-man band, rocking out. You can see also, I think I did this. Yes. So there's these 2 feet on either side. This reminded me of the Sphinx, right? How you have the 2 feet on either side of the Sphinx. Also electromagnetic in nature. Now we go on with the story. He's talking to her about Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And remember, he was in love with the Queen of Sheba. She began to set him tasks which seemed impossible. So the Queen of Sheba didn't really want to be with Solomon. She felt compelled to be with Solomon. But she wanted to be independent. But he made a very good case to be her husband. So she started giving him tasks that seemed impossible. Does this sound familiar? We've talked about Heracles and Hercules and his labors that were given to him that were supposed to seem so impossible that they would likely kill him as he tries to accomplish them. One of them was to find a particular thread of red silk in the palace of 1,000 rooms, to guess the secret name of her mother Jinn. So, one of those was to find a special crimson thread. Just like we talked about before, how many celebrities, specifically those who follow Judaism, wear this lucky red thread. And what you may not have known about that red thread or red bracelet is that they're supposed to tie 7 knots into the thread itself. 7. Interesting. The ancient word for 7 sounds a lot like Sheba, or Shua, or Shiva, etc., right? He has to guess her mother's name, just like in the Neverending Story, where the kid at the end had to come up with a brand new name, or name the princess's mother. The Queen of Sheba's conversation. Let's check this out. It says here that the Queen's visit to King Solomon is a fulfillment of Jeremiah 16:19, which says, "To you the nations shall come from the ends of the earth." Remember how we've talked about where that location is? Where are the ends of the earth? Some people might speculate and imagine it's symbolic for meaning all over the place. It's not, actually. It's one specific location where the ends of the earth are. So the prophecy says that the nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, "Our fathers inherited utter delusions, things that are futile and worthless." The queen came from the ends of the earth, and as a result, her stay with Solomon, she came to believe in the Lord. This is talking about the biblical Lord, of course. So what is this prophecy? The prophecy says that the nations would come from the ends of the earth, and they would tell everyone else, right? All of the natives, "Our fathers inherited utter delusions." That means our ancestors have been lied to. We have been lied to, decade after decade. We have been told things that are futile and worthless. Many things in the modern age, when compared to those in the old world, are futile and worthless. Also, here's Shiva, or you could call this Shiva in Hinduism. Shiva is known as the destroyer. He could speak to the beasts of the earth. Telepathy. Solomon had the ability to speak to animals and insects alike, and to the jinn, made of subtle fire. There's that word again, subtle. Subtle fire. The jinn. He was a great magician, Solomon. Now, Solomon wraps him up and imprisons him. "He imprisoned me with a word of power into a brass bottle." Brass. That's interesting that they chose brass this time, right? Because it's conductor of electricity, right? So this guy starts to fade away and his spirit starts to get sucked down into the bottle. But look where he was. Look what he was standing right up against. A pillar, a column, a pole, etc., and so on and so forth. As we've talked about many times, the pillar and ancient god worship of the rod god, where quite often it is the beam of light that was seen as being this divine entity. And then they would draw people holding on to that beam of light so that they could personify it. So oftentimes when you see these ancient images of these gods holding magic wands or staffs, it might be the magic wand that is the god, or the staff that is the god, or the angel, or whatever you'd like to call it, or the genie, and not the personification, not the person holding onto it. So he gets sucked into his little bottle. And she says, also you can see the colors that they chose to use too, the crimson color. Apart from sleep, she wants to know about the life of genies. Apart from sleep, what does one do for 2,500 years trapped in a bottle? Jinn don't sleep. first and foremost. There is no need for a jinn to sleep. And I believe that the day will come when you will not have a need for sleep. Sleep is done so that we can recharge. If you are already fully charged, things like eating, putting things into your face and then chewing them up and then processing them inside so that you can get energy, it's not necessary because you're already fully charged. Things like sleep, not necessary. So I play a trick on myself. I pray to remain in bottle. I beseech Boshkolo to keep me always in bottle. So now, basically, he's realized he can't escape the bottle. The bottle is our world. He's been in this world, he's been in the bottle for so long that he had to play a trick on himself. Instead of worrying about it, instead of having constant anxiety and stress over trying to get out and figuring out ways how to escape his bottle, he accepted his situation. He accepted it and he tricked himself saying, I love this bottle. This is a great place to be. I don't ever want anyone to take me out of the bottle. Kind of like the Brer Patch, right? And does that work? Does that work to trick yourself into just loving this world and never wanting to leave? To pretend to want nothing more than to be contained in a bottle? No, that doesn't work. It gets you by, but it doesn't work. Inside, you know. Inside, you know. For a jinn, it is the closest to ever coming to death. There's no story about wishing that is not a cautionary tale. That's right. Be careful with your wishes. Your wish is powerful. Well, what if I made no wish at all? She says. Pardon? He's like, what? Excuse me, baking powder? And then he starts to buzz because he's becoming very excited, right? He starts to buzz and you can hear the electricity. Boom! He grows to crazy size and he says, catastrophic! Catastrophic! He grows. He hits his head, right? He's starting to become a giant. He's starting to change shape and morph and stuff. All because she said, what if I don't choose to make any more wishes? If you don't choose to make any more wishes, then you're done. If we stop wishing, we're done. If we stop wishing, it's time for a reset to come. It's time to start things over so that we can continue the never-ending story, right? Chapter 2, A Jinn's Oblivion. Now that's interesting, just because I specifically chose the word oblivion as one of the words for the title of my book, Ancient Oblivion. So let's learn about a jinn's oblivion. Oblivion comes from the word oublier or oubliette, which means to forget. Something that has been eradicated from your memory. That's what oblivion is. So the jinn says, Golten lived as a slave. This girl's name is Golten. She was a slave girl. The name Golten, if we look it up, means rose flesh. So rose-colored flesh is what this girl represents. Now, when I first appeared to her, she fainted, right? As many people will do. Now, check this out. When he first appears, he represents plasma. He represents plasma entering into this world because the bottle has been opened, the lamp has been opened or whatnot, and the genie can come into our world now, basically. It can also escape. That's the time when it can leave, too. So the genie comes into our world, and she faints, as many people will. Many people will bow down when the event comes, because they will fall to their knees, because they can't breathe and the earth is shaking, etc. And it is seen as everyone forcibly paying homage to the god of this world returning. So she faints, as well she should. And he's a giant, as well he should be. I made it clear that I meant her no harm, for I was condemned to the bottle. Now check this out. He represents the plasma that comes down, right, in the form of what we call today magic. When our world depressurizes and there is an opening in the sky and the plasma is allowed to enter in to ground itself to our world, it will be connected. As long as the sky is open, that plasma will do the bidding of whatever it is connected to. It will continue on its course. It will continue to accomplish the purpose that it is here for. And it is here to wipe out things. It is here to clean out this world, to sterilize the world. And unfortunately for many, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that means that the plasma is here to kill, to get rid of humans and animals and all kinds of different things, because it wants to reset the energy that is in this world. But he assures her, I meant her no harm. Why? because I was condemned to the bottle. They don't want to harm us. They're trapped in here too. Once that electromagnetic barrier goes back up, those genies, those jinn, they are cut off from all of their directives. They now essentially have been given free will. They now don't have to, they're not connected to the source. They have been cut off. So now they can roam about and do what they like. So now it benefits them to be helpful instead of to hinder as they were doing, right? So he is also condemned to the bottle because the electromagnetic barrier went back up, trapping the jinn and the electromagnetic functions inside of this world. He tells another story of this girl, and he says that she was distractedly in love with a beautiful man, Prince Mustafa. What does Mustafa mean? She's in love with Mustafa. Let's find out what he represents. It says that Mustafa, one of the names of the Prophet Muhammad, and the name means chosen, selected, appointed, and preferred. So whoever she is, and remember her name, I forgot it. Oh yeah, her name means rose-colored flesh. So the woman who represents the rose-colored flesh, or those of the rose-colored flesh, fell in love with Prince Mustafa. She fell in love with the chosen one. She fell in love with him who was selected, appointed, or preferred. Same as the root of the word Nemo, like we've talked about before, which indicates that Mustafa represents a survivor. Somebody who survives. And rightly so, because he's a prince, he's royalty. If you survive, you will become royalty as well. You will be a king and a priest in your own right, in your own land, doing whatever you see fit, doing whatever you choose. And you will create your own tribes and live for a very long time. His girlfriend gets pregnant, and you can hear that there's all this electrical humming. Mustafa dies, so Mustafa gets killed. And the genie comes to her and says, "They are coming to kill you." But she ran into the hands of the assassins. So they put a blanket over her and they toss her over the balcony. This guy looks at him and he says, "When I was blocked by a follower of Iblis." So this man follows Iblis. His eyes turn black. And he becomes very afraid, actually. And there's this high-pitched pinging sound. You see that right there? There's many references to this throughout the movie, and it's insane because I just watched this movie for the first time last night. Before watching this movie, I talked and did a whole video, I'll refer to it later, I talked about that ringing sound that many people are hearing in their heads that is commonly called tinnitus. And they say that he hears this high-pitched ringing sound when he encounters this follower of Iblis. So who or what is Iblis? Iblis's follower says, "You are not wanted here. You cannot change her history." Or her story, whatever. He turns upside down, and his head turns into this Fantazoid-looking creepy spider deal which falls down to the ground, and says, "If she does not wish, you are doomed." So if we do not continue to wish, which we'll talk about, we're doomed. The genies are also doomed because our fate is intertwined. Our destiny is linked between those made of clay, the human race, and those made of subtle fire, the genies. Excuse me. All right. Oh, and it's Iblis, okay, is basically the, one sec. I need to get a sip of All right, sorry about that. Losing my voice a little bit. All right, so who is Iblis? Iblis is the Arabic version of Lucifer, the fallen one. The angel that rose to the highest and then fell, was cast out or cast down to the earth by God. That's who Iblis represents. There are two versions of the story of Iblis and how he came to be. In the first version, before Iblis was cast down from heaven, he used to be a high-ranking angel, or karub, or cherub, if you'd like, called Azazel, appointed by God to obliterate the original disobedient inhabitants of the earth. So he was created to obliterate the original inhabitants of the earth, representative of the red plasma that falls down from the sky to wipe people out. who were replaced with humans as more obedient creatures after Iblis objected to God's decision to create a successor or Khalifa. He was punished by being relegated and cast down to the earth as a shaitan or devil. In the alternative account, God created Iblis from the fires beneath the seven earth, worshipping God for thousands of years. Iblis ascended to the surface, whereupon, thanks to his pernicious servitude, he rose until he reached the canopy of angels in the seventh heaven, when God created Adam and ordered the angels to bow down to him. Iblis, being a jinn created from fire, refused and disobeyed God, leading to his downfall. The story of plasma, hiding down in Hades, hiding down, receding into the inner bowels of the earth, only to shoot back up to touch the heavens, only to come back down. Now, chapter 2, two brothers and a giantess. You start this story by seeing this child. This child has a sword, and he's being followed by the jinn, who is invisible to everyone else. However, the child can sense the jinn. So he takes his sword, he looks up towards the jinn, and he points his sword at it, and he starts waving the sword around towards the jinn. As you can see, the jinn starts backing up and backing up. Now, the jinn is telling the story, oh, I did that on purpose. I wanted to, lead him over to this place where I wanted him to go. But in reality, the jinn represents electromagnetics. It represents electrical properties and plasma. This boy has a pointy metallic object. If you point that at something electrical, it actually deters it. It pushes it away. Just like this boy points his sword at the plasma or the jinn, and he starts backing up. He's pushing it away. You can use a physical metal weapon like this pointy sword against an ethereal or ghost-like entity, if it is in fact electrical in nature. As a matter of fact, I believe, and so do the Ghostbusters, that it would behoove of you to learn the properties of electricity, to learn plasma physics, at least a little bit of it, and see how it works, so that you can understand how to repel or manipulate electricity to keep yourself safe or to use it for your benefit. Now, the jinn goes on, by some means, this boy senses me. There are those of us who can sense ghosts. There are those of you who can sense otherworldly entities or energies or energetic properties or changes in vibration. There are many of us. I am able to draw him to the stone. So now the jinn is saying, I'm trying to lead him to this place. The place is the place where the stone is. That's interesting. What does this represent in the real world, in our world, in the waking world? Rupas Nigra, the black rock, the stone. A phantom island, believed to be a 33-mile-wide black rock located at the magnetic north and at the North Pole. So, this electromagnetic energy, this vibration, is trying to get the attention of certain people in order to bring them to this stone, to this rock somewhere in the world. That reminded me of our Truth in Movies, where we broke down In the Tall Grass, right? And they showed you this church that had this sign in front of it that says, the Church of the Black Rock of the Redeemer. And in the middle of that maze of grass, they had that black rock, right? Same story as the sword in the stone, which, if you just imagine, remember how I was saying earlier that the beam, the pole, the staff, the column is usually the actual God, and then they put a person there to personify it and to give it attributes? Imagine no boy in this picture. Imagine no sword in this picture. It is a beam of blue light shooting up out of a metallic mountain, aka an anvil or whatnot. So, just like in the sword and the stone, he leads the boy to the rock, which is hidden underneath this particular step at the top of the unfinished pyramid, or the steps, you could say. He says, Gel, Gel, which Gel can mean come, but also, if you remember, the Proto-Indo-European root word Gel means to shine, right? So he's sitting there just like what was his name? Arthur, right? King Arthur, pulling the sword from the stone, and he says Gel, which is a word that also means to shine in ancient languages. Now, Gel can also mean gel or a semi-solid substance, which is where we get jelly or gelatin or jello from, which is often used as a descriptor for plasma, something that is moldable and takes many shapes. Gel also can mean something that is cold, right? Just like the regions where you find these things is the Arctic or beyond the Arctic or Hyperborea. So I follow him everywhere. This boy did not get the stone, so I followed him around, determined to draw him back to the stone. So there have been times in our history when people have come close, right? Some people have gone on journeys to find the Fountain of Youth. Some people have gone on quests to look for the Garden of Eden. They've gotten close, but that energy draws us back time and time again. But at the age of 11, he ascends to the throne. 11, again, Elven. There's the Elven connection. There's also the two-tower connection, right? At 11, he ascends to the throne. At 20, he leads the armies to war in the Caucasus and Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means between the two rivers, I believe. And Caucasus. Interesting. All right, anyway, so this kid goes to war. He becomes a king at 11, which also blows my mind that anybody could follow an 11-year-old boy. Like, make that 11-year-old boy our king. All right, let me not get too distracted. Yes, 11-year-old boy. Absolutely. You are very wise. Okay. I mean, with the change of conditions, that could be possible. These days, I can't see an 11-year-old ruling because basically to me, they all act like 11-year-olds. War had truly rotted his soul. So he had become, his soul or his energy, his vibration started to change. When he was a child, he was wide-eyed and innocent and imaginative, etc. But then the world changed that vibration, like Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. First, she arranges for him to be perpetually drunk, drinking all of the time to lose his senses. And my patience is rewarded, for in this state, when he is drunken, I am finally able to get his attention and draw him back to the secret bathroom. Now, that bathroom, that corner of the world known as Mount Meru, is also a bathroom, or a room of cleansing, a room, an area of cleansing too. It's also kind of symbolically called the bathroom. So he draws him back to the bathroom, but he's going to be too weak to lift the stone. So while becoming inebriated and altering the chemical receptors in his brain, it brings him closer to the spirit world. The problem with that is because of the shortcut of getting drunk and depending upon these other substances in order to enter into the spirit world, the body suffers. The body can't go on the journey. The body cannot go on the quest. So there are some things that work and there are some things that work better. If you make no wish at all, I will be caught between worlds, invisible and alone for all of time. So let's talk about making a wish. What does the word wish mean? If we look up the origin of the word wish, it comes from viskan, to wish, to cherish a desire. Also from the Proto-Indo-European root word ven, which means to desire or to strive for. That means you are taking action in the direction of your want. It is you're taking action in the direction of manifestation. You literally are creating as you go. That's what it means to wish. Wish doesn't mean, I hope for something that I really don't believe is ever going to come true. That would be nice if it did, but I really just don't think it's going to. Wishing is walking towards the desired result. To strive for. To strive doesn't mean just hope and wish and pray and think and, like hope it might come true, like the Beach Boys say. That's not wishing at all. There is a secondary part to a wish, which is your action that you take in the direction of that wish. You have to meet the wish halfway. Now, when we stop wishing, collectively, we have stopped walking, we have stopped exploring, we have stopped journeying in this world, and basically we have thrown in our towel and given up and said, I'm done. There's no longer any purpose here, which is when the world resets. I'm beginning to think I'm in the presence of a trickster, she says. Well, that's interesting because The Jinn represents plasma, and another famous entity is named Loki. Loki also represents plasma, and he is known as the trickster. This beam of light that shoots up from the world, from the center of the world, has been called the trickster many times. Sometimes he's seen as bending back and forth, doing the Kokopelli dance. Sometimes he's seen as a shapeshifter. Sometimes, you wish for one thing, but it turns out to be another thing, which is the whole deal with genies. Now, you say, she goes on to say, you say that you and I are the authors of this story, but I'm not able to write myself out of it. Correct. I cannot for the life of me summon up one eligible wish, and you're asking me for 3, right? She's complaining about getting 3 wishes, basically. The problem here is that this is most people in the world today, I feel, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Most people, they wouldn't know what to wish for. I mean, some common stuff like, okay, I wish I had $1 million. I wish I had that guy or that girl. They could maybe think of a small handful of things that they would actually like. They can think of a small number of things that are their actual desires. But most people have no desires. Most people that I've seen and encountered in this life so far show no determination. They have made no wishes. They just go along and they walk in circles in loop after loop after loop. They have become content with everything, and they no longer seek adventure. They no longer seek to change their reality or their circumstances. So they have no wishes. They're content with whatever those in charge or those above them give to them or tell them. So she can't think of any wishes. Right? It's not easy to just come up with stuff on the spot because we're so used to being slaves. Slaves don't get wishes. Slaves don't get to have their requests met. They just do what they're told. So this is the sign of a good little slave. Is there any life in you? Are you even alive? He says. Are you even alive? Is there any life in you, right? Where is your drive? Where is your power? Where is your life? Where is that excitement? Where is the passion? Where is something? Man, are you alive? You don't have any desires, no wishes, nothing? So she justifies it and says, absence of desire means enlightenment. I need nothing. Well, if you need nothing, you require nothing, and you're going to do nothing about it, why are you're kind of in the way of the rest of us who are playing the game. That's like if you're in a play, in a theater, on the stage, right? And one actor just is like, nah, I'm content. I don't need to play my part. And now that actor needs to be pulled off the stage because now they're just getting in the way of the play or the story, right? Then you are a pious fool. If I'm content, why tempt fate? She says. I'm beginning to wish that we never met. Don't say that! The electricity starts to buzz and stuff. He doesn't want her to say that they've never met. Let's go to chapter 3, the consequence of Zephyr. Zephyr was a foundling. A foundling is a child or a baby that has been found, that has no mother, that has no father. An orphan. Essentially, somebody that has just been ditched, somebody who has been left behind. Now, I'm not saying that whoever this person's mother and father was, that they had bad intentions, that they didn't want her or whatnot. It could be that they suffered some sort of an apocalyptic scenario and something happened to them. So the child was found. That's a possibility. Now, Zephyr, what does Zephyr mean? It's directly related to the word Zephyr, right? If you're a Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, Zephyr. Comes from Zephyrus, and it means, in Greek, Zephyros, the west wind. The west wind. The wind that comes from the west. Now that's interesting because if you look up, if you check out my video that I've done that says east is up on the thumbnail, we talk about how west used to be referred to as down into the earth, and east was referring to space and the sky. So the west wind, if that's true, then that means the wind that comes up from inside of the earth. Zephyr. So, as the fates would have it, my bottle came to her, to the west wind. She grabs the bottle, opens it up, the genie pops out, and it says stage 1, electromagnetic waves. What is it talking about? Let's find out. Let's learn more. Stage 2, vapor. This is starting to sound familiar, don't you think? Stage 3, organic particles. Stage 4, the formation of organs. It's going to explain what that's all about. Let's continue on. So, the genie, a long time ago, is hanging out with Zephyr, and he notices that she's somewhat of a genius. She built this little helicopter deal, just like Leonardo da Vinci had done. And she says, I know what I want my first wish to be. I wish to acquire all knowledge that is useful, beautiful, and true. All knowledge that is useful, beautiful, and true. So what he does is he provides to her books, mini books, all kinds of books on everything she could ever want to get her hand on. That wish has passed on to us. Most likely you're watching this presentation right now because all of those books or collections of information have been condensed and placed behind objects made of glass. They're called your smartphones or computers or monitors or whatever. So she starts studying, and what they do is they take many of her little glass jars that she collects, he melts them, stacks the books on top of them, and then reforms the glass jar on top of the books, sealing the book's information inside of it, just like a little cell phone, right? So anytime that she wants to learn something, she basically can walk over to her desk, pick up one of her little jars, open it up, and the book pops out so she can read it. Exactly like the internet of today. She has devised a mathematica, a language to explain the forces which bring space and time and matter into being. She was Promethean, brave. But she could not solve this puzzle. So she's trying to find an answer to everything. She's trying to find like a theory of everything, basically, how to figure out reality and what it is, but she couldn't do it. She needed a key. Isn't that just like the movies, to say that a character who is a truth seeker needs to find some kind of a key to gain this insight and realization, right? A key to open the doors of her perception. Another Janus reference there. So she used her second wish. I taught her to dream as the jinn do, awake. This is a reference to lucid dreaming, to dream within the dream, to be awake within the dream itself, to be cognizant, to be aware. And some of us have this ability. Some of us can look on the outside like we're just, we're going through the motions, we're doing things, we're really in the moment, etc. But we have partitioned our mind, and there are parts of us that are wandering about the world, thinking of all kinds of other things and experiencing other things while our bodies are here going through the motions. I taught her to dream while she is awake. And you can see all of the light coming off of her. And this way, the solutions came to her when she dreamed while she was waking. Right? To dream is to be in touch with your right side of your mind, the right side of your brain, as opposed to the left side. The left side is during the waking state when it's very analytical and she's writing down all of those notes and stuff. What she was missing, and the key to her figuring out reality, was fantasy. It was the ability to be creative. That was restored to her. She was now able to explain powers invisible, electromagnetic fields and forces, the very stuff of which jinn are made. So the jinn are made of what? Let's read that again. Electromagnetic fields and forces, the very stuff of which jinn are made. Now, up until this point in the movie, I've been speculating. I've been making a connection, saying it very much seems to me like the movie is corroborating what I have already come to the conclusion of so far, which is that these genies are cartoonified ancient versions of plasma. So I paused the movie right there. I'm like, man, that's insane. I walked about, I paced around my apartment, and then I came back and watched the rest of it. And here's what happens. You're electromagnetic, she says, so she calls it right out. Electromagnetic? As you are dust, I am made of subtle fire. What does subtle mean? That word keeps coming up. Let's check it out. If you look it up, it's related to the Proto-Indo-European root word tex, which means to weave. to weave like in and out, just like the DNA strands, just like the triple helix or double helix, right? A weaving. So subtle fire is not invisible fire. Subtle fire is fire that has been woven, that weaves about plasma. To be nothing in a bottle. Nothing in a bottle. Gas that's excited inside of a bottle. That's how you get your plasma bottles and little trinkets for Christmas and stuff like that. People use these mostly for entertainment. Unfortunately, you can use these for great experimentation if you'd like. So she wishes that she could forget that she ever met the genie, and she did on the instant. Just like we also have forgotten that we ever met the genies. Just like we have forgotten that the world ever had an apocalyptic cataclysm that changed everything and continues to change everything time and time again. We also forgot, experiencing worldwide amnesia. I wish for you to love me in return. So she's like, okay, I got a hot genie guy in my apartment who can do anything. My first wish is you to be my partner. So he's like, he starts buzzing, right? Because he's like, okay, I'm kind of into that. So he starts buzzing a bit. And they get close to each other. He looks her deep in the eyes, and they go into the next room, basically. Love is not something we come to by reason. It's more like vapor, right? So she says, will you come home with me? And speaking of vapor, she's in the bathroom filled with vapor as they're talking. So the djinn goes home with her. She puts him into a little salt shaker, and she doesn't want to put the salt shaker through the x-ray machine at the airport. Which is weird because she is more than happy to go through the x-ray machine, which I would pass on. But she doesn't want to put the salt shaker through the x-ray machine, fearing that those x-rays might interfere with her electromagnetic boyfriend, basically, right? So they pull up to her place. Let's take a look at her place real quick. Now, you're going to see a lot of number 3s in here, right? First and foremost, on the car, V333, which is also VAV, and then the 333, which represents the 3 trees at the top of the world, right? Or the 2 witnesses surrounding the 1 beam of light. And then, of course, we've got the column references to her place. She has to walk through columns to get into her house, and one of those columns has the number 3 on it again, which is tree symbolism, or the word deru, right? So she goes into her house, she leaves, she gets back home, she goes into the backyard, and the djinn is out there, and he's just listening. And he says, the air is thick here, full of incessant voices and rushing faces, television and phone towers and such like that. Hey, Kimberlyn Thompson, welcome to my channel. So she's like, is it television and stuff? Are you picking up on all of these sound waves and radio waves and frequencies and stuff? He says, yes, that's exactly what it is. Yes, all of your ingenious devices, all murmuring at once. So he wants to share with her what he can hear. So they touch heads, and there is this high-pitched ringing sound, exactly like we were talking about in my last video. He says, she asks him, you hear all of that? So instead of a high-pitched ringing sound, he's able to separate all of those so that she can determine that they're all different things happening at one time. He says, I also see it, and I feel it. I am a transmitter, which is exactly what we talked about in my last video. If you want to check that out for more information about people's ears ringing worldwide and the concept of tinnitus and stuff, and my theory that I did this video before I even saw this movie, and the movie is corroborating almost word for word what was discussed in this video. Are your ears ringing? Check that out if you're interested in that. All right, so now her neighbors pop out, her little Muppet old lady neighbors who say, birds belong in the air, fish belong in the sea, you shouldn't be dating a genie, or whatever, right? They're very old school. And she says, that's how the good Lord meant us to be. And they start arguing with her, basically, right? She says, you're just spouting rubbish from start to finish. She gets into this debate. She gets into this argument with her neighbors who don't approve of whatever choices she's making. It's science. It's a scientific fact. Do you see how they make the bad guys or the antagonist in the movie say things like It's science. It's scientific fact. Some broad, vague, random generalization that has no merit of anything, no substance of anything. They just slap that on stuff like they slap names on babies. It's science. That doesn't mean anything, okay? You can say something is science all you'd like to. It means nothing at all as a sentence. As communication, it's science. It's scientific fact that humans shouldn't date genies or whatever, whatever it is that they're upset about. That's what they say. They don't actually have the information, so they spout out and regurgitate these broad generalizations, which usually, whenever they're questioned in retort, they become angry because they don't have the answers to those things. They only know the broad generalizations. They're not allowed to know the secrets of the world. Just the generalized version. And then she smiles. She gives a little smile because she is the type of energy, this character. This is how she eats. There are people out there that this is how they feed. Okay? She might walk into her house, have tea and crumpets or whatever and feed the body, etc. But there is a spirit inside that is hungry. And that spirit gets excited when it starts to agitate, when it starts to troll, when it starts to anger and piss off other people to bring them into their side. They're recruiting. These people are eating. She's having a little breakfast of soul energy at this point in the movie. So she falls for it. She says, "You're both pitiful. Shut your cake hole," she says. She meets her full force with some more negative, bad vibes. Pea-brained and pitiful. You, F-face, blah, 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 blah. You know who they remind me of? Those two Muppets, right? That always sit up on the balcony. They're total trolls. Like, these are the OG trolls, are these two Muppets right here. I forgot their names. But these two old Illuminati freaking Rothschild-like puppets that are always up on the balcony just heckling everybody. That's who they remind me of. And then she goes inside. She says, "Why do I let them get to me? Why do I let them get to me?" That is their job, is to get to you. There's good and there's bad. There's positive and there's negative, right? All the good want everyone on their side. They want everyone to be good. They want everyone to be like them. All the bad want people on their side. They think that bad is good, and they also want everyone on their side. It's two sides of the same coin. Why do I let them get to me? I should feel sorry for them. I know many of you have had this conversation with yourselves because I have, right? When you mess up, when you fall for it, whenever you take the bait, whenever those energetic vampires are cast out a line and they're fishing and you're like, "Ooh, that looks good." And you get it and you're snagged and you're caught up in it and you want out because you know you screwed up and you bang your head and you're like, "God, why don't I just feel sorry for them? They're wrong. They don't understand," right? Hindsight. So she's upset. The genie comes inside and he starts meditating. He starts focusing behind her, knowing that she's upset. And she starts to hear these voices of her neighbors. But then she just starts to hear general chatter of all kinds of people. And then she starts picking up on all of those frequencies and transmissions that she just heard earlier that the genie was picking up on when he heard this high-pitched ringing sound in his head. And then he does this little genie flex. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on. The beach is that way. Oh, where is Akraba? Akraba's that way. Then the transmissions start to fade. That high-pitched ringing sound in her head starts to go away. And sentimental string music, beautiful music, starts to play. What is happening is the genie behind her is tuning those energies that are flying around her house and within her house all over the place. And he is creating essentially an electromagnetic pulse that is pushing away all of those harmful frequencies and energies, including those who came from her neighbor. And he is allowing something that is pure. One frequency that is designed to relax, right? She tunes into that. And all of a sudden, it starts to go away. She can focus again. Now, what does she do? She does what she should have done in the first place, right? Or should she? I don't know. Maybe that was her fate. Maybe she needed to learn that lesson. But she brings some food over to the two Muppets' house, and she's like, "Here, have some food. I made this for you. It's pretty delicious." So she covers up past bad choices by making good choices. That's called repentance. She changes her ways. She does good to those people who were persecuting her. And in such, she ends those two Muppet women being her enemies. She fixes that, actually, and she makes life all the much easier for herself. Now, when they come together in the realm of the Jinn, they tell each other stories, and then they show you this plasma shooting out at your face. And then the plasma turns into what looks like, or could be perceived as, an eyeball. Each story that we tell is a fragment of an endless, shape-shifting mosaic. And then they show you this weird hallway of like library books or something like that. And what this reminded me is that movie where that girl and that astronaut go into the Tesseract out in space or whatever it was. I forgot the name of the movie. Maybe somebody in the chat can help me out. But they go through a Tesseract that looks exactly like this part in the movie, right? And this is all of the stories everywhere. All of life is a story. They show you this freeway that goes in circle and circle and circle. It's a vortex. It's continuing on and on and on, always moving forward, but continuing the loop. And the people are driving around it. So they ask us, how will it go wrong? How will it go wrong? But what are they showing us along with the question? How will it go wrong? We're talking about electromagnetics and frequencies, and then they show us all of these towers that have these electrical devices on them. So the Jinn says, I visited the collider. So he visits the Hadron Collider, right? As well he should. That would be a place like his home, because that is basically a giant genie lamp. Okay? Where inside they're trying to manipulate the power of the genie, right? So he visits the collider. And then he says, and then I saw a dish with a great dish. A dish that listens to the whispers of stars long dead. Now you might think, and you might have been tricked into thinking that he's talking about the dish that's clearly right here next to my head. But is he looking at that dish when he's saying he saw a great dish? If he saw a great dish and it's that one, why isn't he looking at it? He's not looking at it. He saw some other great dish that he's looking up at. And that other great dish listens to the whispers of stars long dead. What other kind of dish could it be? Could it be the bowl of the sky? Could it be the great dish of the firmament, which encapsulates all of the stars? Now she says, despite all of the whiz-bang or modern conveniences, we've remained bewildered. Just like I said before, most of us, we enjoy these modern technology that we have, but we don't know how to recreate it. Most of us don't. Right? We just are blissfully ignorant. But you creatures of dust you have no use for us any longer. So what he's saying is the creatures of dust, those of us who are human, right? We have lost the need to talk about the Jinn. We have lost the need to talk about and to incorporate some of the historic elements that have been lost to us over time, right? We don't know about plasma. How do people not know about plasma? When I first started learning about plasma, I'm like, why isn't this taught in the school system? Why is it that I was lied to and taught that there are only this number of states of matter? And later on, I find out about plasma, and I'm learning all kinds of interesting things about it. People don't teach about these things. Perhaps we will wither and fade away. Yes. The stories, the Jinn, the giants, the monsters, the kings and queens, the superheroes and supervillains, all of these things have faded away into fantasy and television and commercials and fiction. People don't believe them anymore because they can't see them with their own eyes, because the conditions of our world have changed. But when those conditions change back, when they flip and they go back to the old ways, people will be quite shocked, maybe even physically. So she comes home, she's looking around, she says, Jinn, where'd you go? She's looking for him. She sees him down in the basement, and he is turned into ash or stone or something. He looks like he's made out of rock, which is interesting. There's a correlation with petrification and plasma. She says, I wish you to speak to me. That's my second wish. Her second wish was to wish him to speak. So he tries to move his mouth, but it starts crumbling apart. And she's like, oh, damn, I don't know if I should have wished that. So he starts to breathe and stuff, and he turns around and looks at her, and he starts waking up. And he says, I was sleeping. And he says, these electromagnetic fields, I can push them away. I can push them away from my head. So we start to learn that the problem and why he is calcifying, essentially, okay? This is kind of like a personification of your pineal gland, okay? Why he is turning into stone or why he is turning into rock has something to do with these electromagnetic fields that he was listening to and showed her earlier. All of these frequencies, radio waves, 5G, 4G, cell phone towers, etc. He says, I can push them away. I can get rid of them. I will overcome them. I can do that for you. My Jinn, if this world is not for you, I wish that you return to where you belong, she says. Now, the second she says that, glass starts to crack. In the movies, we've talked about this many times. Glass cracking represents the sky cracking open. The glass cracks open and his little salt shaker that used to be his little home or whatever explodes. And then it melts on that table, which indicates that if it's melting, maybe it was actually symbolic of ice instead of glass, right? And then she opens up her book. The Jinn, she sends him away because he can't actually live with her or he's going to die because of all of that electromagnetic interference from modern technology all over the place. It dissipates it. It has an effect on him and it kills him. So years down the line, she starts to write a book about her experiences. We could take a quick look at it. Stage 1, electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic Jinn. You see that right there? Truth in movies. People say that, oh, they're hiding it in plain sight. No, you're just blind. I mean, I'll be honest. I've been blind for a long time and I'm still blind to many things. But I'm not going to blame it on somebody else. I'm not going to say, oh, they're hiding it right in front of me. No, I'm blind. That's really what that is, right? I need to open my eyes. Stage 3, organic particles. Stage 4, the formation of organs. What this is describing is exactly what the Bible describes when it talks about creation. It says, and I'll say it in my own words, but it says that those things that are physical and seen come from those things that are invisible and unseen. So here on this side of it, we have the creation of physical organs, the seen, the physical world. On this side, at the beginning, it starts off as electromagnetic waves. So the genie comes back. He pays her a visit from time to time, as the genies do. They go for a walk together, and Aletheia, which means truth, says he would visit from time to time, and they would grasp each vivid moment. From time to time, despite all of the electromagnetic confusion and chaos and noise in this world, every once in a while, many of you have experienced windows of opportunities, windows of peace, windows of calm, windows of happiness. I mean, I know a lot of people are depressed and full of anxiety and stuff these days, but you ever have a weird day where you just wake up happy and you're like, oh, so why is this happening? I feel great today. You know what I mean? Just for no reason that you can think of, right? From time to time, these entities, these geniuses, these spirits, these whatever you'd like to call them, they come back. They revisit. Sometimes a way is made, a path is made. Despite the pain of the raucous skies, he always stayed longer than he should. He promised to return in her lifetime. This is also symbolic of the apocalypse, returning and coming back and being cyclical. He promised to return in her lifetime, and for her, that was more than enough. Knowing that that magic will come back. Oh, what a good feeling that is. Oh, how exciting when you know that the world sucks and you're overwhelmed and you're over encumbered and you're burdened and that you're depressed and there's literally pressure pushing in on all sides and you just want to give up because it's the only thing the world says you can do. You hold on. You hold on because you know things have been different. You know there was a time when there was a golden age. You know there was a time whenever peace and prosperity were restored to this world. This world was inundated with magic and power and mysteries that now abound only in the form of fiction and movies. You know this, and you know it will return, and so you hope. You hope and you wait patiently, knowing nothing new under the sun. And that is our story. 3,000 years of longing. Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ, saying good vibes and goodbye. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, let's run the credits.
So hard to fade away.
How funny.